No. No. Hold on.
I hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you. I can see you. I can not can't smell you yet.
Can't smell.
No.
That's part of the expansion pack.
Exactly.
So you can plug in.
That's the Apple Sniffin' Pro.
Yes, Sniffian Pro.
Yeah.
Sniffian, sniffing. Um, Man, the week just flew by. Seems like
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, you're right. It did feel like it flew by. I did come back late in the week, so it's a bit of a short week for me. Actually, I think in Canada it was a long weekend, so it was a short week for everyone.
I work with folks in Paris and London, and so I get whatever shortenings that are the combination of hours and their holidays, and so we end up with some very short work periods indeed, with which to really get a lot of things done, which is fun and
shortening.
leisurely. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh wait. Wait, I need to turn off this. Enable weight room. Disabled.
I brought my Vision Pro home again this weekend to be able to play with, and it's remarkable. It's a lot of it's really funny seeing it in one's own space and what it does. And that, I don't know if you've watched anything about it, but the sort of spatial memories thing of being able to take 3D photos is really weird because you're always looking at a screen on it, and so the memories are as like those memory things are as real as the things that you see as you're walking around. It's not like there's a sort of a digital overlay. Everything is the same digitalness. And so if you take a picture here, and it also so they vignette out so that they sort of fade into the normal sort of video feed. So if you take a picture here and then you look at it in full screen here, then it just seems like you've got sort of the world stereoscopically clone brushed from here over to here. Or if you take a picture down your corridor and then you look down, then you have that corridor, but as a whole in your house, down into the ground. And so, yeah, I think it's going to inspire a lot of people to have a lot of weird thoughts about the way their world is laid out, and I look forward to that.
Yeah, it feels like it there's opens a potential for like Escher like architecture, metaverse architecture type of thing.
Yeah, and that's something that I've often thought about in terms of the sort of incidental consequences of the tools that people are using to do stuff. Sort of have the aesthetics of them creep into it. So like when people are building things in CAD tools, then wireframes and triangular meshes and all of the kinds of trappings of the tools creep into the aesthetics that they're designing as a consequence of being in there. And so all of those sorts of mistakes will also like the misaligned kind of worlds and memories and things will, even if it's not something that people explicitly opt to do stuff with, will sort of leak in. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see that leakage.
It'll be interesting to see how I could avoid climbing stairs with my sore knees. Maybe I could just be able to slide up the stairs from now on if I just put them in a tunnel. I don't know if that'll actually work.
Well, have you ever tried any of those pneumatic knee assisting
No, I've seen these
prosthetics?
things. I've seen these things. Yeah, they're like knee braces with this extra pneumatic lift, which I think is really interesting. And then there's the other one where it's when you kneel down or you get into towards a squat position, that actually locks into a seat.
Yeah.
So you can just squat and then lock a chair and just sit down and do your business and get up and do what you need to do. I meant actual business, not the other business that happens when you squat.
Yeah. I mean, whatever it takes, whatever you need to do,
Mhm.
you know.
No, I think it's amazing.
Brandel, I missed the first minute of that conversation. Is this what you were describing? That's what it is? Nice.
Yeah, the Vision Pro
In a
and
black
the-
Pelican case, I would have expected that the design team would have spent 3.5 years and $4 million in tooling to do a beautiful custom.
I'm sure they have. This is not
Yeah.
the final packaging.
No, I assume that, but even for like, the internal product testing or whatever.
Yeah, well, so a lot of other prototypes were being carried around in the even bigger category of Pelican case, because they had a lot more stuff bolted onto them, and it gets smaller and smaller over time.
So Brandel, I gotta turn this. My light decided to turn up on its own, which is always unsettling. I was just on a fun call. One of these things you get them every once and again where people are like, "We would like your expert opinion on this particular topic," and yeah, I mean, I think so. One of I can't remember the exact question, but it was like in future of entertainment kind of stuff, but it was also kind of like more future of brand experiences, whatever, and so they throw out the questions like, what do you think about like virtual reality, augmented reality? And I sort of told them, I was like, well, I've been through it before. Like, I'm not sure. I don't, as I'm not cynical about it. And also I think it's going to be but this is just my opinion, that the others, what will happen will be things that will be surprisingly more mundane than we expect. In other words, it wasn't going to be, it's not going to be the hyperspeed kind of experiences that oftentimes are splashed in the media and stuff. And I actually, I kind of referred to you indirectly because I was like, there's a guy in my community, he's like very involved in stuff, and AR and VR is one of his passions. And I was very complimentary. I won't, I didn't name you, but I was just kind of like, because I think it's true. As to like, he's very thoughtful and he's very articulate on the points, and he's technically exceptional. And so I feel like you've helped moderate my natural kind of probably reaction from my experiences working at the HIT lab back in the day, where I was kicked out of the lab because I was a troublemaker. But it was just like a kind of on the fly thing, and they asked me, I came up, I said, the other day I was watching a video, and it was a video, and it had like spatial audio. And so I'm watching this thing, and I didn't even know that it did, but I was listening with my AirPods Pro, and I just did the thing, my head movement, and I was like, wait, something's going on. And I just told him, I was like, I didn't need someone to say like, this is gonna be the greatest audio experience. It's just happened. And there's something really beautiful about the subtlety of that. And then my technically mind, it's like, how do I get that to work on my podcast? Kind of, my mind starts going in that direction. And then I'm like, whoa, you got enough to work on. Stop thinking that. And so, I was just wondering the same thing. If you like any thoughts that you have in the context of the visual modality, because when they were asking me, and they were like, we're not asking for predictions, just like what's coming to your mind. And I just said like, yeah, it'd be kind of interesting if you're watching a film, let's say, and there's some kind of dynamic outpainting. Is that what we call it now? Is that it, Trey? Outpainting? Just the things at the border. And I was like, maybe it's not even that it was like filmed. And I told him about that we're working on this magazine, Thomas, your project, and it's like, man, I think I got another ad, which maybe we need, which is like, just some shitty production outfit in Burbank. Maybe not shitty, but it's just kind of like, we'll outpaint your film, plus or minus 15 degrees for $8,000 a minute or something like that. $8,000 a frame. I don't know what the cost is. Plus or minus 30 degrees for $18,000 or whatever it is. And I was like, that, for me, I was just going from audio to the visual modality. I don't know. It's just, so that's a bit of a ramble, but I'm just kind of curious in the context of the work that you're doing, and I'm genuinely not interested in anything proprietary, obviously. No, I am interested, but I'm not expecting it.
Yeah. So no, I think that sort of outpainting. I think one of the really interesting questions with immersive media like that is, what do you do with all of that space? Something that you can do is make it big, but then there's actually such a thing as too big for a movie to look at, because if you sit at the very front row of a movie theater these days, you cannot see all of the screen, and it's actually kind of a minus rather than a plus. But sort of the ambient field of all of that stuff is really interesting to have, and it changes the impact of it. At the Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab, they actually get somebody to stand in virtual reality, where they just have goggles of various sizes, and they get them to stand literally in a space while people perform a play just for them, to see how weird or voyeuristic or how immersive and all of these different things are. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of experimentation about like what's awesome, what's expensive, and what's sort of psychically too much to experience.
Right.
There's another really interesting thing that I saw at a paper a few years ago called Reality Skins, which I really like, and Koichi and Matsuda has been playing with it as well, where you like so Vision Pro doesn't tell you where everything is in your environment, but other devices probably will in the future from Meta and other companies as well. And based on sort of saying like there's an obstacle here, there's a door or like a portal here, having the ability to kind of dress those up in whatever themes, I think is going to be really interesting as well. So like actually being able to go like you're still playing or watching some kind of media, versus whether it's sort of interactive or not, and being able to theme spaces, not just having outpainting, but having sort of structurally relevant outpainting of your space and environment, sort of pertinent to that space. Maybe using hallucinated media or something, or having it statically sort of configured so a coffee table turns up like a roller coaster ride, whatever. Like, I think there's a lot there, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what people find to be worthwhile to do to their spaces in order to kind of appreciate it. Like there's light spill, that was publicly advertised, where the sort of the light of your movie screen sort of glows on the ground, but that's kind of pretty basic, and I think there's going to be a lot more thematically relevant stuff that people will be able to do to their spaces, and it'll be interesting to see what people actually think is preferable and desirable out of all of those options.
This kind of reminds me of like figuring out that film should be made at like 24 frames per second, and that like other frame rates just kind of like mess with our brains. Is that like similar? Are you like standardizing these types of things? Well,
so the device displays at 90, or I shouldn't have said that. I think the VR devices need to have a high frame rate. So like HTC Vive is 120. The Quest is 72 or 90, depending on what it's doing.
These two viewers here.
Sorry, a video started playing.
Um, and yeah, so a device, a VR device has to have a high frame rate, but that's not necessarily to say that the media needs to be. So, because if you were looking at something and it was only updating a frame every 24th, then that would look terrible because your head moves around in all kinds of ways. So the frame has to be sort of updated in terms of like the position of the frame and stuff like that. But in terms of what the media is there, I actually don't know whether that helps or hinders a 24 FPS kind of standard.
That makes sense. It's very different.
Yeah,
I'd be curious to, like, I've watched movies in VR headsets, and when it's the high, anything beyond 24 frames really gives it that soap opera look when you're watching movies. It has a bit of a videotape effect to it, and a lot of it is
So do you mean greater than 24 frames?
Yeah, greater than 24 frames. It
I
has
think
a,
network TVs at 30.
yeah, so like network TVs
Okay.
at 30, but then if you look at some films are actually, you know what a good example is? Televisions that have what they call like I don't know, like enhanced reality or true reality setting turn on, which is an absolute abomination, because what it does is it interpolates the frames between the 24 to ramp it up to 60, and it becomes super crisp. Like there's no more persistence of vision. That's the beauty of 24 frames, is you've got this tiny little blur in between every frame, so that when you wave your hand, it's blurry, but with a 60 FPS sunscreen, now I'm thinking about FPS, everything is sharp. Like there's no blur of the hand. So we've become accustomed to this cinematic look, which is the blur. But then when you have 60 frames, 120 frames in movies, it kind of looks ridiculous. And there's a movie with Will Smith, and it was some kind of an action movie about a train, and it was shot by Ang Lee, I believe. And that film was shot natively at 60 frames per second. And if you go to any Best Buy where they're showing off 4K televisions, that's often a film that they show, and it just doesn't look right. There's something so wrong with the way that movie looks. But what I've noticed is most people don't get it. If you're a cinephile, I think you see it. You're like, why does this movie look like a BBC production for some reason? And yeah, I went to a friend's place and he was watching a movie, and he had this like True Vision turned on his television. Everything was super, super crisp and super sharp. And I had to stop him. I had to be like, we need to pause this movie and I'm going to fix your television. And then he didn't see the difference. He was like, what did you do? I said, I did this thing. He's like, I don't see the difference. I'm like, good, because we're going to leave it this way. It's great for sports, terrible for film.
Thank you for explaining that. I have been like so off put by modern TV for years now. I've been so confused as to like what has happened.
And you know what? A lot of it is just a setting on your television that you can fix it. That's the problem. A lot of people think that movies look bad these days, when in fact it's just your television interpreting movies that looks bad.
There's also often a sharpen filter on TVs, like just a pixel sharpen, as well as the motion interpolation. So like there have been people in these display companies that have taken an increasing number of liberties with what they think the aesthetics of media are. It's just like, I mean, yeah, if you really love seeing that, it would be pretty awesome to have a glitch TV that has, adds additional JPEG artifacts, just so you can feel like you're illicitly streaming again, like your teens.
Scramble TV back in the day, when they used to scramble television, you try to like, catch those like late night nude scenes as a kid. Yeah, the idea that television companies are imposing a visual aesthetic on what a filmmaker intended to do, I think is the offensive part.
Yeah, that's something that like one of the things that Apple sort of boasts about internally is the way that iPhone changed what phone internet was, because prior to that, phone carrier telecommunications didn't wanted to be able to take liberties with what was sent to you via the internet to your phone. And one of the biggest sort of squabbles that Apple had to have was to say, no, you don't get to impede or alter any of those signals, because they would add extra JPEGing and put limitations on certain file types and things like that, because that was the days of the other WAP, the wireless access protocol, rather than the song. And so there was expectations that it was only a specific kind of data transmission. And yeah, once they became generic devices, then telcos couldn't sort of scrimp on that stuff. But yeah, interesting to think about, like, if and when different sort of participants in that sort of system get to be get to have opinions about what's transmitted or not. Like, I think Netflix doesn't transmit the film grain for the most part. That is added in post. Because it's terrible to compress, but it makes your picture feel better. But yeah, like, different people having different opinions is fun. Like, you have reached your monthly quota of red. Just the color.
Wireless access protocol. Brandel, you're a fucking genius.
Has anybody been watching the Foundation series on Apple that's been coming out?
I haven't started, but I'm super. I watched the first season and it was great. I really liked it, and I thought there was some like nice builds from the books. Like the whole genetic dynasty thing was like invented by the show, and it's brilliant. It's just such a smart build on the story.
It's so good. I would like watch the first season, and then I to try back and try to watch the just season of Star Trek, and couldn't do it because the writing is so thin and so corny. Like, I was having a really hard time getting through like sci-fi that just wasn't as deep and sort of dark as Foundation. Anyways, I just highly recommend it to everybody, including like Demerzel being a woman robot also really complicates it, because he's ostensibly like a male robot, whatever that even is in the books. Yeah, really fun.
Aaron, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm having a hard time hearing you. It sounds like you're talking through like one of those like super long 30% extra Pringles cans.
He's using the phone filter.
I'm definitely
It's like you're wearing sunglasses on your sunglasses.
mostly hairless.
I'm sure what you said was funny, but we'll just roll with it.
It sounded like you were having an objection to Foundation, that you weren't enjoying it, or you thought the writing was corny. That's what I heard.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no,
Two beeps if two beeps if yes, one beep if no.
No, just the way that they made Demerzel into a woman in the show also is really interesting. Like the relationship between the genetic dynasty and the robot is totally different as a result. Anyway, just highly recommend it for anybody who hasn't started yet. It's very good.
What's the scene in the movie where it's like A, B, C, beep beep? Okay. Or no, who was the guy in not Better Call Saul, the other one, the actor who recently died. So it was great, and he had just had the bell, and they would spell things out. Just make a sentence out of them. It was like, shoot 4 reels just to kind of get him to say one word. Okay, I'm gonna get Foundation because I was gonna do a War Games on this one. I was gonna be like, I'm just not feeling it, because I tried the first season. I was like, I mean, it was like one of my first sci-fi books. I remember my dad got it for me. It was whatever, 8 or 9 or 10 or something like that.
I was worried. I was worried at the beginning of the season. It was like, okay. And then by the time I got to the end, I just thought the end was great. It was such a, like, I really wanted to see the second season when that first season wrapped up.
Okay, I'll give it another go.
We're talking about
I feel
Foundation,
like
Chris.
I feel like media has changed so much in terms of speed and scale. It's sort of inadvertently age gated, just because so many like young people watch like, you know, TikTok and so much kind of short form video. They're very much kind of programmed to, you know, have action scenes like on top of each other. That's just like the way in which their brain works, or, you know, they have two screens in front of them while watching something else. I've been recently rewatching some of the X-Files because of this alien government stuff happening. And like, I'm just noticing like, wow, this feels so slow.
Yeah, I also think that the sort of dollars per minute spent on media is different. So that, like, you know, watching shows from a different era, you're just like, you're really drawing this out because you couldn't afford to do more with it. And so like everything after all of the sort of prestige television, probably after Mad Men, just got kind of film quality, and it was very much not that anywhere prior to that.
I think streaming plays a big part in the ability to abandon a show at any point and pick up something else. Whereas with scheduled TV, if you started one show, you couldn't just switch channels and go to the other show and get caught up, right? Unless you had like a PVR or something like that. But I think that plays a big role. So now we have this like Mr. Beastification of modern day content where we have to keep the dopamine receptors fully engaged and have an edit every 3 or 4 seconds at the risk of losing your attention. So there's like no more drawn out scenes.
That's interesting. Is that sort of in addition to or at cross purposes to the necessity for people to be caught up to speed on what it is that a piece of media is doing? Like, you know, a lot of books that are serialized reintroduce characters pretty like comprehensively every book in order to make sure that you know what kind of role they're going to be able to play. I don't know. Does everybody pick media up from the start? Do they do it more so now that there's streaming than when it was sort of broadcast serialized fiction? I'm interested in terms of what sort of obligations flow from the story because of that as well.
Yeah, see that's something I'm not sure of. My gut tells me that once upon a time, if you wanted to start watching a show, you had to start at whatever season the show was on at the time, and you would get into it, and maybe you would go and revisit episodes once it got into syndication. Whereas nowadays, if somebody says, I want to start watching a show, I think the default is you just go to season 1 and you work your way up to whatever is currently on air. So I don't know if that answers your question, but like I feel like it's in the best interest for streamers for streaming companies to encourage people to go right from the beginning, because it's one of the key metrics is watch time. So the longer you can have somebody watch a series, especially from the beginning onward, then that's probably be better than starting mid-series.
Yeah. So that I wonder. So that's definitely been my experience. If I like something, then I will tend to pick it up from the start. I wonder if that has an impact on how hard scriptwriters can kind of lean on and increasingly introduce arcane lore into a series and expect people to know it, rather than having to kind of treat every episode as a potential on-ramp.
I don't know if writers are doing that these days. I think writing rooms are so small, and so I think there are very few writers that stay for the long story arc, that are invested in the show. I think writing rooms are really, really small and piecemeal. As someone, if you have a good success in one season, you might get drafted to go do a better show somewhere else, and off you go when a new writer comes in. So their goal is to try to like make their mark, and less interested in the lore or the overarching story.
Yeah. And there's also sort of competing commercial interests in terms of saying like, oh, this series actually didn't go for longer than 3 seasons, because then the sort of contractual obligations that flow from the status of a show as being longer running change. And so I think somebody was saying that, is it like Hannah Montana was only 3 seasons when it was actually many more, and they just changed the name of the show in order to have plausible deniability that it was a different show, just with all of the same characters in the same universe, with most, like 90% of the words in the title being the same and stuff like that. It was like, it's a spin-off. So there are sort of competing sort of demands based on the sort of perspective of the writers, who are increasingly fungible, the consumers who are increasingly able to consume stuff from the very beginning, and then the producers in the commercial sense of the media, who have sort of a mishmash of concerns about sort of making sure that something is new but related to a sort of existing intellectual property. Seems like there would be an important role for an increasing quantity of lore keepers on a show in order to be able to kind of flow that back in for writers who are increasingly fresh to the subject material.
Lore keepers, I like that. Another good word. Thanks, Brandel. This makes me think a little bit about Jay's World Runner concept. I think that's going to probably become important in virtual world metaverse type of things, that you want to maintain some kind of historical consistency and long story arc in the fictional and even the real worlds, because how else will you differentiate a world when you can just jump into any world and it's just going to start from scratch every time you jump into a new world? So I think that might change. This might be a deviation from what we know in television today. In the virtual world, that long story arcs and stories you can sink your teeth into is what you really want to get into. I think of just even with communities, like right now, the web feels like this disparate collection of places that I go to get random dopamine hits. But then you have something like Discord. You have the Near Future Lab Discord, where you go in, and there's a consistent cast of characters. There's a consistent story that's being told, and you're invested, and you spend more time in this world than you do in all the various little websites that you might have access to.
Yeah, not to mention like the other side of the spectrum in terms of like YouTube content that is almost like ambient video of people just like farming or like cooking for an hour, or like just birds chirping, because there also is like this counter rise that certainly isn't as big as like TikTok, but of these like ultra long form, incredibly mundane videos that people just kind of need to have on.
Yeah, that's called the slow TV movement, which I think that's a great that's something we should think about for Green Pages.
Yeah.
What's the Hollywood slow TV blockbuster? It's like 7 hours. You just sit in a theater and watch something super mundane.
Oh, it's got to be longer than that. There's like a whole series of like follow the boat down the Rhine.
I watched that. Yeah.
Did you really? Oh, how was it?
It was a COVID watch, and it was just nice to have the guy's company. He's just figuring out how to. I forget what the boats were even called, but I was in a small apartment. He was on a small boat. I've lived on a boat, so I could pretend to talk to him about that experience. And yeah,
that's a really interesting counterpoint, Camille. Like your TikTok people versus the slow TV people. Is there? Can we reinvent normal TV as just fast slow TV?
I think so. I could see it like, how there's Bitcoin network and then there's Lightning built on top of it. I could see that being slow TV with fast TV built on top of it. That's just like, maybe live cutting and rendering or something.
Yeah. So back to, what you were saying about sort of immersive computing VR, Julian, like one of the things that's fascinating about having VR and having VR that is spatial computing. It's not VR. Apple would never approve that. Is that you can just put pixels everywhere, so that right now, like I used to work at an ad agency back in New Zealand, and we would have the 10 hours fireplace on over the fireplace in the sort of the main meeting room. But for the most part, people do not sort of set up a monitor exclusively for being a fireplace. But in a spatial computing world where you do have the ability, not just like with Oculus, where you can play a game, but to have screens sort of situated in places, you can put a fireplace wherever you want, or you can surround yourself with fireplaces if you want to redo the "this is fine" meme. So there's going to be a place for every kind of media, literally, in terms of there's going to be a separate screen or region that you can kind of devote to those things. And what you want is not constrained to where physics and budget permits you to locate this media. And so the sort of the juxtaposition of fast and slow media, the sort of the how pervasive any piece of media is in terms of tainting or changing the appearance of the environment and ambience around you is those are, I think, all open questions for what people are going to be able to play with.
I've been reading I don't know if anybody is a Paul Virilio fan, but he's got a nice little book, The Art of the Motor. And the last essay from this book, which is from 93 or 95, it was originally published in 93, has all kinds of things about, as processing. Well, he's quoting other people, but he's, talking about processing power and graphic frame rates and microcomputers and the possibilities of virtual realities and all this stuff. I wonder if any of you are steeped in his writing, because all of this stuff is really prescient, but it's 30 years old at this point. We're sort of just like rounding the corner on stuff that he was talking about at that time.
I was definitely a big Virilio guy in the when I was doing my master's. I was reading a lot of Virilio. So it's been when did I finish my master's? Like 6 or 7 months ago. It's probably been about 15 years. But yeah, important stuff. It's always, it's more, for me, it was like more evocative than predictive, I guess. Stuff to think with.
Yeah, I found that his voice feels sort of missing from a lot of the current conversation, and I'm not really sure why. And then another missing one is Lewis Mumford, right? Like, I guess both of these two seem like just absolutely absent from a lot of the sort of high level speak about new technology.
It's the generations, it's just a generational thing, just one way or another. Like when I was doing my master's, like it was Virilio, Mumford, Langdon Winter. These were all like required readings to understand. Today it was like that was the assessment. Those were the the frameworks through which you learned how to understand technology as culture or whatever, and then also the kind of implications. I don't know, those things just evolve. Really, I think it comes down to who's teaching what. Get down to it.
Yeah, I don't know whether there's been an explicit and intentional political program sort of stemming from flowing from Silicon Valley, but just rampantly ahistorical. Like there's this sort of assertion that nothing about the past matters, and like on the one hand, it might be convenient if you're just trying to fill technologists' minds with the latest APIs. From a really sort of close-centered view of like, well, you just need to push these updates. But on the other hand, it also means that nobody's left with the critical skills for the major points of comparison or the major points of continuity with what it is the technology is. It was fascinating reading Mumford and going like, oh, the Industrial Revolution is really more of a, like, it might be a point of inflection, but there is a lot of continuity to technology and the way it was changing social structures for the prior 800 years. And like most people, like a friend of mine was ranting to me the other day about a YouTube video that was talking about before technology, which they meant was before the 1920s. And I was like, what the
fuck? Yeah. It's tricky. But I think there is a historicity to Silicon Valley, the vibe, and with the reasons why when I say I got in trouble like in grad school, it's like it was because of that to a certain degree. I mean, I'm not trying to say like I was a thoughtful rebel necessarily, but it's like I wanted to understand the relationship between the things that the VR that we were building and the things that we were being taught, which I mean, I found it, a little bit kind of, we need to talk about this more. If you're going to teach me about the weapons that we're using in the Gulf War that I'm seeing at night after class and talk about that in the context of VR, like, well, let's talk about the relationship between, military and technology, which is not, I'm not like doing it, I'm not trying to antagonize anyone. Like, I'm as fascinated with guns as the next person, as just like these, unexplainably, destructive and at the same time fascinating artifacts, especially at that time when it's like, Colin Powell sitting there. I'm totally dating myself. Colin Powell sitting there at a television monitor that's been wheeled in by some adjutant to show this missile going down a stovepipe. Like, how can you not but be awed by that at the same time, possibly, potentially, and maybe or maybe not being revolted? I'm not saying that anyone should or would be or necessarily, but I was just like, oh my God. And then the next day go to class and have the guy who helped develop those weapons at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base talk about in the context of like how virtual reality is going to save the world, and not come out of that just completely dazzled and kind of like, what is going on here? Not, I'm not saying in a kind of like this, the world is fucked up. It's just like, what is going on? I'm seeing this from every angle, in the educational context, when I go home and, turn on CNN, which is what people did during the Gulf War. And at the same time, this fascination, because it's like, oh, this shit's laser guided and they're somehow beaming an image from the nose cone of the thing back to some command. Like that was Star Trek shit, as far as I was concerned at the time. So then now I want to ask the questions. What is going on here? Why am I feeling all these kinds of weird, and what is the connection between these things? Because they seem to be connected because I'm being taught it while I'm watching it. And I'm, but then I just went to raise my hands like, can we talk about this more? Your lab pass is now revoked. Like, oh. Okay.
Well, and the other downside of it is not only were like, even if you think that sort of keeping those sort of cultural political questions at arm's length from the technology was a cynical ploy by the powers that be to minimize the literacy and legibility of those as media moments as well as sort of technological ones. Like it's pretty clear, like if you ever read stuff from the rise of predator drones and drone strikes, that the sort of the media consequence and landscape kind of ate the military alive for a good few years, as there were just an increasing number of generals and high-ranking people who just were tuned into Predator Tube, basically, and were addicted to watching these feeds of these things being sort of conducted or perpetrated, whatever word you want to use. And so that bit them in the ass, because the military themselves didn't have enough preparation for what it does to a person to be able to see that kind of thing, what sort of contrast in terms of what information people have to interpret the scenes that they're seeing. So like the fact that you're seeing the same feed as the remote drone operator is very different from the information they're acting on as they're doing that. People have clearance to see the feed, but they weren't in the rooms that sort of dictated what they decided to do actually from up in the air that day. And so like it's interesting that that they're what it sounds like you could have done in those rooms at that time was help people understand that there's a sort of a media component, there's a popular conception, public or not, of what it is that these tools do and these feeds do, and they failed to catch on to what could be understood from it. It reminds me of Wag the Dog, which I always think of as a better movie than it is, because I imbue it with all of the sort of the things that I think it could be. But I really like that concept, and like what understanding war from a media piece is, and if you can conduct it in that way. I feel like some of the drone footage coming out of Ukraine is increasingly cognizant of the function of these camera feeds in a way that you could imagine somebody having started from Vietnam onward, once cameras actually got there, being able to kind of take that much more seriously as an art form from back then, and then we would have had a much more different perspective of war over the last 50 years. But it didn't happen, for better and worse, and so we're now seeing it. But yeah, it could have been very different.
Yeah. Hey, should we do project status? Because Chris is here, Thomas is here, Jed's here, Dre's here, Brandel's here, Taryn's here, Zoom users here. Maybe Chris, do you want to start? So Chris, and sort of talk about both, I guess, employee manual, and then also we're planning a general seminar.
Yeah, so for employee manual, still just been going through all the stuff that people have been sending. So thank you.
Oh, did you? I sent that manual.
Yeah, I got
to
it.
You. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I got it. I've been
Awesome.
been reading through it. It is diabolical. This it's just like so weird, all the different ways that you want to try to like lay someone off, basically. And the acknowledgements, I was hoping there was gonna be something very sweet, like, I thank my mom for helping me create this manual to like fire people, but it was very corporate. Like, it was not what I was hoping for in the acknowledgement sheet. So something to think about for the manual. Yeah, I haven't done much more than just like reading and that type of thing. So I think like the next thing is the general seminar. And so I put together some copy. Definitely could use some help with imagery if people have time. But I'll post the document with the content in the channel. And yeah, so I think we're just like trying to figure out like a time, like a day to do 2 sessions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. But I keep on settling kind of on the future of organizations. I don't know if there's a better word for it, but I try to play with that a little bit in the content too. So because there was like a future of work, but that was more about like my job is the way that seemed to go. So anyways, that's where we're at right now. And I'll post the general seminar doc, at least the copy for that. But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else any other ideas people have had? Oh, I did put together a list of readings and watching. And so the Mersk like together rap like song thing is in there as one of those, and then Severance, and then a bunch of other stuff basically. I'll post it right now. Yeah, anybody have any new ideas about the yeah, anyways, that's it. I don't have much more of an update today. I don't know if someone else wants to go, but I just posted it to the channel.
I can jump in. Green Pages is nearly full of pages. So we have 4 more full page ads to go. 1 full spread, and then we're at 80 pages, which is great. And then we can fill in some blanks with quarter page ads and smaller ones, but the light at the end of the tunnel is growing a little brighter every day, which is awesome. But that doesn't mean you can't contribute if you want. We're still working on classifieds, which is fun, but I think we've kind of gotten closer to a better format for that, which is really nice to see. And that's been, moving things along. I think we'll have a new flat plan to show next Tuesday at 10. I'm going to try to put together the rest of things. I think we got a shot at getting all the full page ads done. I know Taryn's working on one. I finished one yesterday. I want to do another today or tomorrow. So we're nearly there, and then we get to like really dive into refining the whole thing. And yeah, I don't know. I'm really happy. Thanks everyone for helping out. It's been really fun.
And Thomas, I just wanted to add, maybe like as a open thing for everybody else, I ended up hiring a Fiverr to help create a knowledge graph of all of the content that's inside of the Green Pages. So they're going to create like a collab notebook that will look at all of the different Google Docs under a folder and then pull out all the entities and then create a knowledge graph of relationship between those entities. And I think this came up during the call earlier this week, but kind of how much consistency is necessary in these projects. So it's very interesting to me and mapping that stuff out. So I'm hoping to make it kind of a generalized tool. So if you end up using a similar kind of Google Doc structure, which is lots of documents that will have content, as long as there's like name entities in there. So like Paramount was one that came up around kind of consistency of that inside of the Green Book. Not a big deal, right? Like, and I think we should all answer our own question, like for each of these projects about how much consistency is necessary. But I just something interesting that I think could be used for other projects if people wanted to. So
yeah, super excited about that. I think it'll be like a nice, if anything, like create a nice memento of the project for everyone to kind of like see the kind of world we created. Because it is like a super organic process. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what comes out of that. So thank you. Thank you for hiring the Fiverr.
yeah, I just pushed the button. That's what I did. I was the drone operator, basically.
Right. Cool. That's Green Pages. See you on Tuesday at 10 if you can make it Pacific.
Doesn't the whole world just become ready to be the right button to push eventually? Just that you undersell your agency.
I can get. I can give. Go ahead, Aaron.
Either way. Sure. Okay. Well, yeah, I can give an update on Trip City stuff. After many ride-alongs with the city doing like audits of the bicycle network, finally my partner managed to get us invited into the policy working group. So I sort of shifted from being like outside the room to inside the room, and have slowly just sort of like trying to chip away at the Overton window there, like pointing to how fragile bicycle commuting is as a system, given all of its dependencies on everything from like local maintenance to storage to global supply chains, et cetera, and just kind of like feeding in how much simpler like skateboarding is as a thing, and also like the ways in which the current plan excludes the space of the sidewalk. Also things like changing people's minds around, like people call bicycles and skateboards micromobility, and trying to get people to think of them as just mobility, and actually thinking of cars as a form of macro mobility. And if it's a low occupancy ride, it's actually like, you know, low occupancy macro mobility as compared to like a bus, which could be full of people. And so sort of trying to change like perhaps even the left's mind around, like, you know, you often get like very liberal people who are still like very holding fast to their cars. Sort of like, you know, getting people to see how like a single occupancy vehicle is like a more than fair share, or one person in a you know, a larger vehicle is a more than fair share sort of situation. Anyways, just like getting ideas out to people at this point. And I like talked to the project manager about the whole thing about attaching sensors to skateboards and also other vehicle types, right? Like the EEG monitor in the brain and the, you know, the biometrics and stuff on the wrists and all that to sort of capture stress, and, you know, the AirPods to get like the accelerometers of like, you know, where people are looking when they get to intersections and all of that. And he's interested. He basically said to me, like, the city does not do a good job with data. Like they do a bad job setting like a basic stable foundation for data collection. And so recommended dealing with the university. So I'm going to try, he has a contact at San Jose State. And then there's another person at Davis that I know of who I have a sort of secondary connection to. So I'm looking for university types to maybe help, you know, secure some grant funding for this, because as of yet not been able to find some. But he was really excited about the idea, and like, you know, everybody's sort of providing all of this like qualitative data for their various mapping projects, things like that, but there's not anybody measured. Like, you know, throughput is sort of like the key metric, but stress and, you know, sort of pro-social things are not as easily measured. And so trying to get a sense of that. The current North Star for the project is having people within 5 minutes of a safe network to move through it, but often the lines are sort of like around neighborhoods. So it's still ultimately about like commuting from one neighborhood to another and not necessarily about movement within the neighborhood, which like if you're old or young is probably more typical of how you exist in public space rather than needing to get across town on a regular basis. So yeah, just trying to like figure out what needs to be measured to support that. But I feel pretty confident in the tech stack that we've talked about before, but just getting the money necessary to support the work that I actually have no idea how to do. It's really sort of my next step. Yeah,
I thought.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was wondering about other studies that were adjacent to the question of, road condition or something that might you could piggyback onto or get alongside those people who are already in the channels for road condition studies. Now, of course, theirs aren't as fine-grained as ours, but the resolution is always a demand, right? So maybe there's a way to provide a higher resolution telemetry on their studies by using skateboards or something.
I mean, that's the basic proposition, right? That like a profilograph may measure the quality of like road surface as used by a car, and like a walking score on Zillow.com may tell you how accessible like your local grocery is, but it doesn't really tell you about like the surface quality as it pertains to small wheels or crutches or walkers or whatever else, right? And like trying to point to the limits of focusing on certain modes, right? Like a bike lane, a drive lane, sidewalk, all this stuff. And like credit to Julian too for putting out the Yvonne Illich book, Energy and Equity as well, because like that does a really good job focusing on velocity, sort of like alongside and perhaps even ahead of mode. Understanding like a society that had the capacity to move pretty seamlessly at 15 miles an hour is actually more equitable than a society that privileges like being able to move at 30 or 50. But then, of course, having to fit, stationary at a stoplight. And I just can't help. Now, every time I drive a car, I'm like, man, I really wish I just like was forced to go 15 miles an hour and then never had to stop at a stoplight, as opposed to having the option
I think
for 30.
It's one of my joke things I say to people, but I don't understand why we stop, because it's antithetical to going places. And totally. It is surreal though, as soon as you realize that if you can make a right
what do you do with the
turn,
people who ought to go in the go in orthogonal direction?
Well, that's what roundabouts are for.
Those things are terrible. Right, I grew up in New Jersey though.
Right. Well, that's the problem with roundabouts, is that Americans don't know how to take turns, right? So we don't know how to use them. But yeah, actually, I mean, to that end too, like sitting in some of these working groups, I've been telling people to indulge like a radical imagination, and have been offering that it is worthwhile to think about a possible future and reasoning backwards from it, as opposed to trying to reason forward from today, which is obviously overwhelmingly shitty situation for urban mobility. And I said that at the beginning of one of the meetings, and then some other person who was helping to lead the meeting said it again at the end in closing. So for what it's worth, like the tenets of this group are definitely lighting people up. So thumbs up.
Some traction.
That's awesome. I don't know how much, whether you've been there before or what you're familiar with, but it was really striking to be in Japan and see the chomei system of how sort of city layouts and sub-city regions are laid out. In the area that we were, there were quite large parts of the city that the sidewalk was actually just delineated by paint and was all asphalt. And that was really confronting at first, but actually really beneficial, because it meant that cars could drive on the sidewalk if it was absolutely necessary, but it also put people on high alert that this was a shared space. And it probably also meant that the overall surface was more maintainable as a consequence of not having to have these altitude changes and we're not having to have these significant altitude changes and material changes. I'm sure that it would result in an overall cheaper budget. Just really interesting to see that the kinds of things that are done with paint and instrumentation. You've said that plastic and paint are cheapest, but they're also the most superficial. But yeah, when you actually devote like all of the different delineation jobs to just paint and plastic, then you end up with some really interesting alternatives. And so, yeah, I'll look for
even a step
more
further,
concrete ways of drawing reference to it. But yeah.
What if they're just augmented? My friend worked on the Boeing air traffic control next gen You know him, Craig. You remember Craig Rosenberg, Julian? Yeah. So Craig worked on Boeing's air traffic control next gen system, and they were simulating air traffic control pilots in their software to see how fast their designs would run. But they have completely simulated the whole air traffic control highway system so far, 200 years, 300 years out. The simulations are running faster than real time, knowing they absolutely know what these highways in the sky would look like if they ever had the legislation to do them. And at that point, the whole highway system is just a plastic thing in the air. It's just a light path they follow, like you push your VTOL and it's pre-programmed to follow that route. So there's no delineation.
Yeah, totally. Figuring out a way to actually let the actions that you would need to do with a car be programmed into a system. You already have things like they vibrate or beep when you get too close to the edge of something, what is that like fully ramped up? Like, could you have governors on cars that basically like, oh, look, you can't go more than 15 miles an hour. We're already talking about it with scooters. Like people say, oh, I don't want the scooter on the sidewalk, but like the scooter might be safest on the sidewalk for the scooter rider. And so maybe you just make it so that they can't go more than 5 miles an hour on the sidewalk, right? And so, what would happen if all cars couldn't go faster than 15? Not because of like a speed limit on a sign, right? But because you actually couldn't, it's like you enter the city limits and all cars drop to a certain speed or whatever else. But yeah, Brandon, I totally agree. Like there's nothing particularly good about a cement sidewalk, especially one that's legally mandated to be maintained by the building owner, so that like a crack in the sidewalk just gets painted orange and stays that way for a decade. I think everybody wants access to just good pavement, and like protected bike lanes are cool, but then you have this barrier, right? So that if it gets full of trash, you can't get out and all these sort of things. Like I think best thing for everybody would just be a mass of very well maintained asphalt. But then, yeah, how do you make sure that doesn't lead to just massive movement by cars and all these other things? I don't know.
Well,
so I want to. So this is project update. So Aaron, it sounds like you need to do a workshop so you can have these
exactly.
conversations.
No, right.
Yeah.
I
didn't want to derail, but I just, it was so interesting that I would love to find a place to put that into the discussion sometime.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you should arrange a workshop or something.
Yeah, I think a workshop, a general seminar, like the future of the sidewalk or the future of transit would be really great. I'm in the mood. Yeah, this is I would say the status of the questions being raised at this point. No need to get the answer.
Transit hierarchies.
I would just so I'm saying that, and also and you're saying you want it, so you just need to lead me to help you organize that. Basically, I'm not going to do it on my own.
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, cool. Jed, do you want to do androids? We've got a bunch of stuff going on. I think I'm supposed to be looking for packages somewhere.
Packages? Oh yeah. Yeah, actually that was a question. Did a package come today? Not yet.
Was it supposed to? I was like looking for the number and then I just kind of gave up.
I think there was one coming to your door that would have a few of the foil packs.
But is that supposed to come today is what I'm asking?
Oh, well, last time it came overnight. They probably didn't do it overnight. So
I don't think
maybe it's not today. Maybe it will show up later. I think you sent it 2 days ago. But yeah, so the general update is that the cards wrapped in foil packs were shipped this week to
Wait, what cards? What are you talking about?
Or you want me to back up even farther?
Well, just yeah, there's always useful to have the 2-sentence summary. But I don't know. I'm looking at Taryn, and I feel like she's just got this look of like, who are these people? What are they talking about? Cards and foil?
Damn it! I tried to back up enough where it made sense today, but I didn't get there. Where do I start with that, Julian? Then
we're doing the Android's Dream project, right? So we're doing the Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, but from an adjacent future, which is that there are androids and they're about as common as a TV remote control. And the book is essentially the book that you would pick up that because you're trying to figure out, how do I operate this damn remote control? And along with that, Jed brought in this idea of like, well, why don't we make these sheep in some form and represent them in this kind of as a collection, like a herd. So there are these electric sheep in this world somehow. And Jed made a bunch of 64 variations of them that are now a kind of collector's set. So they're going to come wrapped in, kind of like this kind of deal that will go with the book. So the book will come with a pack of
Electric sheep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
electric sheep cards. Yeah, and then I guess to drill down on that, yeah. So there's the book is done. It's sitting at the Filament House, and the cards are en route there in these foil packs. And then there's to follow a box set of a complete set of the 64 sheep cards, which is in process still. And then one thing that I guess that accompanies this, besides marketing them from the standpoint of the Near Future Lab Shopify store, would be I guess it's like a very what's the simplest form of Android's Dream.ai as a web presence that complements this these products, this world, in a sense. And so the past, I guess, week or two has been about figuring out what that would look like at a very simple level of basically the cards have the ability to scan them with a QR code that would take you to this web portal. And I guess I at the moment I sort of have like a Figma doc with what that would look like, and it probably should be shared amongst some people that are interested, just to kind of get some thoughts on just how to finish it up, because I think we want to get it completed here soon, sort of in time for when everything's kind of going to go out to the world here. So that's sort of, I guess, the wrap up. And so yeah, maybe we can figure out a time soon to look at some of that information, just kind of like what a simple web presence would be to complement all this. I guess that's what's on top of mind, besides everything just kind of coming in.
Yeah, the site is a critical path, for better or worse, I think, because we can't really launch it without a site, because people scan the QR code.
Right. Yeah, I guess in my mind it's kind of like what's the clearest, simplest way to present that, and without getting into the weeds of that right now. I think we've talked around it a bit. I probably got a bunch of thoughts on it that haven't been shared or were shared a while ago, and it would be nice to share with people.
Yeah, and it was parenthetical to the main point of a conversation I was having with the folks at Radar, but they offered that they could possibly help with building websites. So I'm not sure exactly what that translates to in the context of what we're doing, other than, I'm not sure what that means, but the offer was out there. So
Right.
just kind of,
Yeah, and I think Brindle, if I remember last week, I was a little bit tired or don't remember exactly, but you mentioned something about perhaps helping with a little bit of a website. Was that wrong about that, or was that right?
No, I'd be happy to help. I make graphics on the web, which sometimes is a bit like websites, and sometimes it's just sort of pretty pictures. But I can definitely take whatever materials, like, so if you have the things about what materials are available, like you've got the pictures of the cards. If you have the pieces that are metallic as channels and information, then I can turn that into fancy graphics. If there are things that we know about in terms of sort of ambient effects, like, I don't know, if you want to have it look like it has a glowing aura of different colors, things like that, then I'll be able to help with making things like that. And I can also put text on a page and things, but just if you've got roughs of what kind of design directions and ideas and references, then I'd love to take a look through and talk about what sort of things are achievable on the web, as well as in 3D, and as well as on devices like our friend over here. So yeah, I'd love to make it very futuristic. So yeah,
I think that seems like a great thing to explore. Yeah, maybe we can find time to do that, and if anyone else wants to tune in, that'd be great.
Cool.
I just had a silly idea. You should include a piece of steel wool with the package.
Steel wool. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, Julian, and yeah, whatever. I took a look at that radar. That seems like interesting stuff there. And yeah, if it makes sense to get them involved. I guess my thought is what, you know, whatever the presence, the first presence here of the web page is, just to keep it simple. You know, I guess I'm looking at it like this is sort of the beginning of a world to build and explore more. And so there, I don't know what content would really be there besides that, and some information just maybe, you know, giving a little more insight into what the cards are, you know. Other than that, I'm not sure what else we would need there at this point.
Your question for how does the world expand, I think, would be what do the electric sheep dream of?
Mm-hmm.
So what's their problem space individually?
Yeah.
As part of this research, did you look at why we count sheep compared to other things at all? Like, did you get any sort of historical perspective?
I don't think there was any. It wasn't a research, but I don't think it was any research. It's just pure instinct.
Yeah.
Okay.
It must have been that shepherds had to count sheep once upon a time.
Yeah, but like, was it shepherds counting sheep? You know, was it children counting sheep? You know, like, who was the first person who's like, oh yeah, I count sheep and you'll fall asleep, right? Like, that lineage may be interesting to look at if we want to sort of expand the universe and apply those concepts to androids, right? What does it mean for an android to sleep?
I watched a really interesting documentary series, not in the 1970s because I wasn't around, but from the 1970s, but called The Age of Uncertainty by James K. Galbraith. And one of the things that he talked about was the mass and violent dispossession of land for people living on the Scottish Highlands for the benefit of wool production that went through just an enormous acceleration through the 18th and 19th centuries. So could be there. It would be interesting to take a look at if the sort of the importance and function of sheep in the context of people's kind of folklore.
I'm reading
went through a massive jump at that point.
Some authorities think it may have been due to a tallying system devised by shepherds in ancient Britain, but the link between sheep and sleep goes back even further with a chapter in Disciplina Clericalis, suggesting that counting sheep had already been a cultural trope in Islamic culture for centuries. So there you go. Islam. Sheep herders couldn't sleep until they had counted all their sheep to make sure none were missing.
Yeah. Oh, it was.
That checks out.
What was the? I mean, I don't know if we ever talked so much about counting the sheep. Post just looking at the title of "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" It's sort of a. I don't know. There's something. You know, what did that?
Let's explore the question for a minute, because like, if their androids are dreaming of electric sheep, aren't they sort of dreaming what the electric sheep are up to in their little world? And so, what we're really begging on, to me, is the purpose of the sheep, you know, and how they occupy a niche in industrial society and therefore need to be dreamt about or something.
But it was the sheep in the novel. It was just that Deckard wanted a real animal. It had nothing to do with, you know, dreaming so much. I think it was just sort of like an evocation, you know, that was. I don't recall anything specifically about dreams. I mean, you know, in a literal sense, it was like he wanted a real animal.
No, I'm definitely
was he willing to,
basing
you know, he's going to make enough money to be able to
cyborg.
buy like a, you know, a rabbit or whatever. He's like, I don't want a rabbit.
Right.
All right. Dream isn't long for.
I think I'm relating to the current flock of cyborg sheep with these industrial componentry and thinking about them as, you know, demi-organics that need an industrial management component on their side. Their layer of cybernetics needs some kind of process. So let's, you know, maybe that's what the androids are dreaming about. How, I mean, for me, I like the idea that the sheep are, you know, mining landfills for precious materials, let's say. So they have different kinds of extractors and they have different kinds of extruders, and they go out and they graze on former landfills and produce useful industrial products, like literally shitting little robots that run away and, you know, or something. And so the you know, that begs the whole question of what's in the catalog. But the to me, there's an industrial arm to the sheep. Then they need, the dreams are what they're dreaming of. Where's the gold in the landfill?
I mean,
At
a
least
lot,
one kind.
yeah, I mean, the way the descriptions are written are kind of about them as products, right? Sort of like
Yeah.
they have these tasks and they do things, or you know, what they might be used for. They're,
Yes.
and
But
I
if
mean,
you've got thousands of those in your corporate distributed across North America, you've got a flock management problem, a new kind of problem. So that to me is what the dreams would be of, I think.
mhm.
Is that too hard?
No, it's pretty open. Again, are we going too deep into this and want to continue with the things, or is this good? I didn't want to.
Workshop.
Yeah.
I think this is just a potential new direction to expand things in, if you want, obviously.
Hmm.
Like contextualizing sheep as, you know, industrial material, sort of in the wool industry, makes me wonder what other creatures sort of would androids be dreaming of in this space, you know? Do androids dream of horseshoe crabs?
Maybe this is maybe you know, I think there's the first level for the site, which is like just get the fucking thing up, right? And then, you know, as much as we need to tell to, so that when someone goes to it, they're not like, what a ripoff. You know, sort of like, this is stupid. Why did I even bother going to this site? And then, you know, maybe it's just this kind of organic, I don't know, but what's happening now is you know, it's nothing I ever heard of in the context of when we were actually running the project. And maybe that's what the, you know, the world building ends up being. So there's no dungeon master. It's just kind of like, I don't know how you facilitate that, but people are like, you know, my BDR X7 just had a dream about horseshoe crabs. Okay, cool. I don't, you know, I don't know. I guess it's also interesting to think of like, how do you not overdetermine what the world should be?
Hmm.
By that I mean
Well,
imposing things on it, as opposed to
the,
just like what's happening here, literally. Like, suppose it's like what, you know, every people, I don't know, like it gets workshopped more publicly.
there's new stuff that could emerge in the future, and then there's old stuff that could be displaced. And so the flock is doing one of those two things, or both, right? It's easy to imagine it's somehow the sheep displace some thing we have now. We don't need it anymore because the sheep do it. Workshop.
Yeah. Mm. Okay.
And then so I started Super Seminar. Thomas is helping with that.
Yeah.
And that was it was more or less unplanned. I think I was riding my bike and I was like, what would something be called Super Seminar be? then I launched it and figuring it out as we go along. It's fun. It's fascinating because some of the participants are like, so what's the overall plan? It's just like,
It's gonna be super.
can't you feel what I'm feeling? I mean, it's called Super Seminar. What more do you need?
Sounds like
it's like
some sheep.
we're doing a festival. It's gonna be great, and people are like, well, what time's load in? I don't know. Show up. It'll be fine. We'll work it out.
When you get there. What about an ultimately 100% organic festival that was absolutely not planned in any way, like strategically not planned.
That's what we're
All
working
orga-
towards. What are you talking about? It's,
100%
it's on the list. It's the Imagine Harder Festival. There's no date. It's just going to happen.
Putting the immediate in media.
Yeah. What else is going on? Dre, what are you up to?
Hang on, multitasking with
Design
mute
Fiction
button.
Double Daily. I feel like sometimes either my email's slow or something. Someone's like, wait, didn't I just get one?
I got a few, yeah, I got a few things going. Solar Punk update.
Oh,
Is that all of the copy for the letters have been edited? Or there's been the edit pass that has gone through. So I'm going to go through and double check everything. I'm going to reach out to David to do a jam session next week. I had a good conversation with Jay for JMO yesterday. So he's going to write like an introduction or something in there. And then I've been continuing conversations with, or I fired up conversations with Ken again out in Hong Kong. So while we finish writing the rest of the book and figuring out what the cover might look like, I'm going to be working with Ken to figure out cover stock and paper stock and that type of stuff. And I'll probably chatting with you, Julian, about stuff around that. So that's a project there. And then otherwise, I've been doing a lot of thinking just around design fiction and what I'm doing with Design Fiction Daily. I'm on my 9th month of doing Design Fiction Daily. And so yeah, today I put out I decided I'm going to do sci-fi specials for the next few weeks. So I did 5 science fiction films, but not my top 5. It's like 6 to 10, because top 5 is, it's just, we're probably going to agree on a lot of the top 5 sci-fi films. So I decided to go just kind of like the next 5. And that was really fun to put together. And that was inspired by another Substack writer that reached out to me where he said, I love your design fiction work. I'd love to see your favorite science fiction films. And so that started. So I've got a handful of Substack people right now who have all published their like next 5 sci-fi films today. So so that was kind of a fun little thing. And then this week there's a couple of like Green Pages adjacent things. Like I mentioned something about like a semiotic standard for AI labels for movies a while ago.
I thought that was cool. I saw that post.
Thanks. And it was inspired by, I knew that this is something that could potentially happen. And I just took like that standard triangle warning sign and I just slightly redesigned it to literally have the letter A and the letter I as the actual symbol. And then I just went nuts after that and tried to figure out all kinds of fun, weird, and some nonsense labels. And I posted that the other day, but that was a bit of a slog. That was a half a day in Illustrator alone, just putting together a whole bunch of icons. But I'm happy with how it turned out, and I'm kind of hoping it gets a bit of traction, because there is something in the news right now about Hollywood trying to come up with effectively that a semiotic standard. It's like, it'd be nice to make that design fiction be some inspiration for what should and shouldn't be. And I've even got it down color coded from like minimal use of AI to comprehensive use of AI, but at the same time also recognizing that like AI is going to be really, really important for accessibility. So what are the different accessibility features that AI can offer a movie? And then there might be just like full-on warnings, like here's some, like this movie uses your data, or this movie is using AI to be more manipulative, or this so there's some really interesting ideas that came to mind as I built this thinking while designing, which is super fun. And then the other thing I started doing is it's a bit of a slow burn at the moment, but I created a Gumroad account where you can sell digital files. and I'm offering the templates that I create my design fictions in, because they're all original creations, and I meticulously go and create smart objects. You literally just double click, paste in your design, hit save, and it's like a rendered mock-up. So those are all, I'm making them available on Gumroad. So if you go to the last 3 posts, like the meal outside of time, the urban oasis, and climatophobia, those ones all link at the bottom of the post. They all link to a Gumroad where you can just buy the PSD and you can make your own design fiction. So the Gumroad is going to start to get filled with like basically design fiction artifacts in the form of mock-ups that you can just download and create your own versions of design fiction based on designs that I've created.
How's the transactional stuff doing for you, Drea? Like, are you where you at in terms of? I mean, your empire of t-shirts and.
So the t-shirt stuff, I've somewhat given up on that because Etsy's kind of annoying. I think they charge like, I don't know, 50 cents per product.
I thought you were using Printful.
Well, no, Printful is what I'm using to print the shirts.
Okay.
But Etsy is what I'm using to sell the shirts.
Gotcha.
So Etsy it can start to become expensive as you amass inventory. And I like that Etsy is a marketplace, so people are looking for stuff in there. But the problem with it is that they don't auto bill you have to go and pay a bill manually every month. It doesn't just refresh. So, and if you don't pay the bill, your store gets put on hold. So that's a little bit of annoying. So I think I might end up switching over to Shopify for some stuff. I'm going to rethink the store thing. I had an AI art store that did pretty well, and I did a t-shirt store that did okay. So that's kind of like one little media empire. I still do all the stock footage stuff. So I'm running around shooting footage of things and posting them on all the usual suspects. So that's
with your orange safety vest and hard hat on.
Sometimes when I fly the drone, people don't bother me when I've got the cinema camera out, but when I fly the drone, there's always someone who's got to come and talk to me. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think one of the reasons why that popped into my head is that I think actually this might be a good Dre, we've got a bunch of seminar-y kinds of scheduled ticketed things to work on. I think there's one that is about, actually I literally got a request. It was from a professor.
Mm-hmm.
Would love to have you come here and talk to the students about just how to be an independent creative.
Oh yeah,
and all the stuff. It's not just like, well, follow your curiosity. It's not that bullshit. It's kind of like, how the fuck do I set up the site? How do I gain the confidence to enter into a kind of transactional business? How do I remind myself that it's okay to sell something that I made? I'm not selling out because I'm selling it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're selling out when you have a job, right?
Yeah. You're selling yourself out,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good subject. I think there is there's like myriad side hustle videos on YouTube that talk about doing this, like, have a this and a that and put multiple eggs in multiple baskets and so on. And they make it sound
I like the one where it's like, I want to learn how to make money while I sleep. Where's that lesson plan?
Well, yeah, exactly. And there's no such thing as passive income. Like, there's always some form of active involvement that's required in order to get to a place. But like with stock footage, what I love about it is that, I went to Puerto Rico and shot a bunch of earthquake stuff and landscape footage in 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know what happened recently in Puerto Rico, but like these Puerto Rico clips are selling. Like, I'm selling a lot of clips these days, and it's great. Like, it's something that I invested some time in, a few years ago. So there's something really good about that. But my philosophy is that if you are, if you're lucky enough to be a creative person and to make things, it's like your responsibility to like pollute the world with your stuff. Like, get your stuff out there, put it all over the place, and don't give it all away for free. Like, just decide, like, I'm making these mock-ups. These mock-ups take a long time to make. Right now I'm selling them for $5. They're so cheap. But I'm just doing it as a test. Like, let's just see what happens. Will people want to
Oh,
do
so
this?
have you figured out? So the workflow to make the mock-ups where it's kind of like put your add your logo here, kind of that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
that's what
Oh,
I do.
cool.
Yeah. So every time I make a design fiction, I'm rendering something in Midjourney. I'm doing a combination of like Photoshop, lots of Photoshop work, Illustrator templates, but I do the smart object. Basically, it's just using smart objects. And I invest all this time in that, and I thought, well, may as well just zip it up and throw it on a Gumroad and add some keywords to it. It adds 10 more minutes to my work process for every design fiction. And if I sell a few over the course of time, then that's cool.
Dude, if you I mean, so here's an opportunity. This is why we're here, and this is why we collaborate. Like, if I would totally blast those out. I'd say, like, here's some resources for the the aspiring design fictional artist.
Yeah, so what I would say, I would hold out and blasting that out at the moment, because right now I'm trying to be mindful on figuring out, like, what are the archetypes. I want to have a nice collection of archetypes, and then I want to just create a bundle. So rather than buying like $5 each, here's the $50 bundle where you're just going to get 20 of them, and you'll have a full complement of archetypes that you can use in a variety of design fiction projects.
So just know that whenever you're ready.
Yeah, awesome.
And we
come up with a fun name for it.
Couple that with a design fiction debrief, or not? No, wait, what is it? I can't remember. One of the things, one of the platforms. Where it's like, then you get, then you do like, hey, here's how I do it.
Yeah. Well, so okay, here's another thing that I think might be worth doing a general seminar on, or maybe even a super seminar on. I was approached by a university professor in Sweden that asked me, they're really interested in the work kit cards, and they said they had gone to they saw the video, and they liked how we were improvising, but we weren't working within the constraints of a previously built world. And for him, he's teaching his students, he wants to use the cards, but he was asking, like, how, do you ever use these cards within some macroeconomic constraints, as opposed to playing within the like micro world that we're doing? And I sent him some examples of where I have actually done this, and this is just a decision that we've made in those tutorials to not impose those guardrails. But I gave him tons of good advice on what to do. So I think that might be something about, like, how to use the work kit cards within the constraints, because some company might, or institution or organization might have a world that they want to explore within. So that might be something like just a different version of using the cards, where you set up some rules around it. So I think that's an opportunity there too. Yeah, and then there's just the Substack, just doing the Design Fiction Daily. I think the plan is that in 3 months from now, I'm going to have a year under my belt. And so I started putting together a book. So it'll be like, I don't know, Design Fiction Daily musings for a year of having done this. So there'll be a lot of thoughts around design fiction, the design fiction process. And I created a design fiction of my design fiction. I mocked up the book and everything. I just did the whole thing. It's like, there's a little secret website where there's like a design fiction book that looks like it's for sale, and it's not. And I just did this because I was like, okay, this is it. I just created a target that I'm going to hit, and I bring it up every once in a while, and it's like, I need to make this happen.
Yeah. I'm kind of beat. I'm going to sign up. I had to get up super early this morning and take the missus to the airport. I'm bushed.
You gotta have a nap and brand new day after that, huh?
Yeah, I know. Have a nap and completely ruin the day because I'll wake up at 6 p.m. Yeah.
Those are
Sleep is
brutal.
ruined. It's ruined.
Yeah, I made that mistake on the way back from Japan.
Yeah.
I think I'll just power through from now on.
Yeah, you really gotta power through those things.
Dre, I know, you know, this is the one drum I bang on. But if you have a desire, you should also make the 3D objects of some of these things as well. You could put them up on Sketchfab or whatever, such that if anybody ever makes a device that has the ability to position these in 3D space, you could make AR quick look files of them and distribute them on the site too. And you'd be able to get people to actually shoot them in the wild. That'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, okay, you know what? I'll ping you about that. I'm gonna think about archetypes like that. I've got some basic 3D knowledge. Like I mess around with like Blender occasionally, so sometimes I can just make the rough prototype. But yeah, I like the idea of like a design fiction artifact that's in 3 dimensions that we can mess around with.
Yeah, let's chat. I think it'll be really funny to be able to actually take like your Haagen-Dazs. Sorry, go ahead, come in.
Oh, no, I was just going to say for reference, you should look at the 3D objects that Procreate added. So they have all these like sort of 3D blank objects that you can just drop into canvases and it like immediately, you know, applies your drawing or whatever to the outside of it. So you can sketch in real time, like on the outside of a spray can and stuff. So that may be a good place to look kind of for archetypes and just sort of opportunities in terms of thinking about letting people customize.
Totally.
No, that's great.
I linked to that. Sorry, I was so overly talkative today. I linked to that new website pledge form that just went live, and it's like 5, Reed Morano, Justine Bateman, but there's interesting a pledge form where you pledge that there's no generative AI and minimal CGI and VFX used in the film. So it's really interesting.
This is the Credo 23 thing. Yeah, that's
so that was that original logo that I had sent to you. That sort of kickstarted that conversation.
Yeah, you're right.
It's on Tumblr too, which was
it's just
we're going retro here.
Well, if you look up Credo 23 on Google, it's like there's 1,000 things called Credo 23. I know. I just feel like it's so unimaginative that they really should have used AI to help them like figure out a name for their thing.
I know.
And
it's
but I think it's misguided. I think the idea that you know they're not using, it's like, hey, does your scriptwriter use Grammarly? Guess what? He's using AI. Like, at what point do you?
I know.
Like, it's not the right approach. Like AI
I've probably had 15 different tweets set up to like start a conversation with Justine, who I should just probably go offline with somehow, because her rants on Twitter are so misleading and incorrect, basically, in how she's describing generative AI. I feel it's really counterproductive.
Yeah, I know the whole Credo 23 just feels like a Temu version of like Dogma 95. It's not they're trying to do something. I get it. I think it's good, and I think there should be more of a Lars von Trier style. Just make movies without using the assistance of external things. But he goes as far as like you know lights. You can only use natural light.
Right.
And like why just call it Dogma 95, and don't create Credo 23.
And be done with it. Yeah. We'll see where it goes. I mean, Matt Weiner is on the council. I was like, okay, you like Mad Men, the amount of like background VFX that it used to create those scenes, you know, from different eras.
Well, just procedural textures alone, AI is going to do tons in 3D. Like, you're still going to have people working in Maya making beautiful scenes, but you need a procedural rock texture. AI will do a better job than somebody trying to hand paint that from scratch.
Yeah.
Now you have to, you know, now your movie's been tainted with AI, unwatchable.
Anyway.
Hey, Julian, have you had any follow-up with the AV companies that you can share about. There's like the AV taxis have a whole anti-AV thing that's happening here in the city in San Francisco. And the conversation is just wild. And I'm very curious to know if there's that internal discussion. I mean, obviously a bunch of that couldn't be shared, but people are putting cones on the front of them, to stop them from moving. And there's like all kinds of reports about them getting in the way of fire vehicles and stuff. And I mean, obviously nobody's being like, okay, well, here's how it compares to regular cars, but just curious if there's more about that that's come up.
I haven't talked to anyone in that space directly, after that project.
Where I keep thinking about what it would feel like to be trapped inside of one of those things if a group of people surrounded one and spray painted all the windows black.
That happened, right? It's already happened.
Oh, I don't know. I just like, I've been thinking about like, people are going to start fucking. They already do. Like when I skateboard, we like swerve at them on purpose to teach them how to stop for us. But people are going to start doing.
Is that really why you're doing it? Or are you doing it to antagonize them?
I'm trying to get money. If I get hit, that's like I'm good. I'm set. That's why I do it.
I think it's smart. I think that you have to, because like what one learns, they all learn, right? So
is that true? How do you know that?
Well, that's why they do it, isn't it?
You keep asking the question, and I'm asking the same thing. Isn't it? It's like is that pattern where it's like that's what you want to believe. I'm just kind of curious. It's like,
yeah, no, for sure. It's probably some of the best sensor data on skateboards that has ever been created, right? Like just because it's got so many cameras and it's happening in the real world and all these things. Like,
I think you're trusting that a lot more is going on than possibly is. Maybe it is, but I also think that you want that to be true more than possibly it is true. Maybe, I don't know. It might actually be good, and also I think knowing skateboarders is probably a little bit of like, let's fuck with this thing before there is, let's train it, if we're honest.
Well, I believe in their potential. Like I want them to exist, but I'm afraid that like we don't actually have like the social trust necessary to really make it work.
Yeah, or maybe even the engineering expertise.
Yeah.
To make them work in a truly complicated, multivalent, highly dynamic, kinetic, oh my god, that crane just fell kind of world.
Totally. You should come up here at some point though. They're everywhere. It's amazing.
And there was a thing like, now I saw that now you can do them. Now whatever authority said that they can now actually charge, right? I read something somewhere.
Yeah, you have to pay, but you have to like get on a list. I don't know. My sister's on the list. She hasn't ridden on one. It's like only after 10 p.m. or something.
When they're only drunk people, kind of stumbling in the streets.
Yeah, if you're at like the right bar at the right time, there are a lot of mischievous plans about like putting black tape over all the sensors and like going on a rampage in the night on these cars.
People are like angry, man. That's just like that's anger.
People are so mad about it.
Why? What's the mad? I'm asking all these questions like I know what I'm talking about.
I think it's curious, I think
because this is the thing. This is like when the thing that we think is just an engineering instrument is actually not, because it's causing all these behaviors. Like, oh, it's changed the whole bar conversation. Of people are like, hey, I brought a bunch of gaff tape with me tonight. Yeah. Let's go fuck with the cars.
Yeah. I think it's like too much technology. Like people are just uncomfortable with the amount of robots that could be around. And I think people also are expressing fear about like how quickly the city is buying into autonomous vehicle taxis. But like, I also think it's just like fun. Like it's fun to like stand in the crosswalk and have the car tell you to move. Like I think it's a good laugh. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Well, I think it's also frustrating for a lot of vehicle owners who've been vehicle owners in San Francisco for the past 20 years because of how much the city sort of has changed in terms of vehicles and where you're allowed to drive and closing off certain streets and stuff. So I think from their perspective, there's a lot of frustration. So then watching this sort of now the city, like, you know, is trying to like limit people's own ability to drive, but you know, now they're trying to orient themselves towards this AV future. I think it's really frustrating for people who own vehicles and need to own vehicles to be able to commute kind of to and from work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get the sense that it might be arriving like too soon. You know, like driving has not yet been made inconvenient enough that most people have opted for alternative modes, and so this doesn't feel like the saving grace that it could be. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it is really just like highlighting a certain misalignment in the culture. It doesn't seem like it's being perceived as a harbinger for good.
No, it doesn't seem like connected with what people are wanting in the city. People don't seem to really care. It just seems to be like a thing where they're like humoring Google, basically.
I think that another part of it is that there are there's a contingent of people who were always and will always be sort of relatively hostile to private passenger vehicles. And this kind of forestalls a transition from any kind of mass transit, because it means that infrastructure needs to be still substantially car shaped. But it's these cars that are owned by organizations. And there's another antisocial aspect of it where, like, at least, not that there's always or even that much dignity in driving as a profession. I mean, not that it can't be, but there often isn't. And Amazon is doing, you know, incredible jobs of stripping away dignity from human drivers as well. But at least when something had to be driven, it had to have a driver, and that meant that a person had, you know, the income and capital and capabilities devoted to giving them that ability. And when people can just deploy capital to create more capital, that they can just sort of spend money on machinery, and that makes them more money, then that changes the sort of obligatory sort of redistributive component of technological change, because they don't need to have as many just physical bodies getting sustenance from the way that they make their own money. So those are all sort of shifts. But yeah, like I think that there are a lot of different things from a lot of different people. I really think mass transit would have been really cool. Having been in places where there is some mass transit, it was really cool.
Speaking of which, the Detroit Mobility 2050. If anyone wants to do some Gen AI to submit something for that, I feel a responsibility as one of the jurists to solicit.
You got yours in there, or you got your juror?
I haven't shoved mine in. You know, it's not. It's jurist is overstating. It's an exhibition, really. So I guess helping curate. But yeah, I did some. I haven't shoved them into the Google Drive yet, but yeah, some like I was still trying to get. I mean, I like a bunch of them that came out of my collaboration with the robot, but some were like more like it's almost like a trolley system I was like looking at, but that was coming out more like a ski lift running on the ground, which was kind of interesting, like hop on hop off kind of deal. It's just like always moving.
Wait, are you describing a vehicle or a system of vehicles or something?
So it's mobility, right? So they don't want just cars. I guess we don't just want cars, but people thinking about other modes of getting from A to B. So vehicle, you know, it's a facilitator for mobility, but it's by itself, it's not maybe,
Gotcha.
you know, just think different, I guess, think beyond. If you say mobility futures and all of a sudden people start giving you four-wheeled vehicles, it's like, well, imagine harder.
Yeah, Detroit, on my recent trip that I posted about this in the pump and dump thread, but I ran across this pump track it was just like very short little thing, but it was, you know, along the pedestrian pathway. I've never been to Detroit before this, and I'm just sort of astounded by like how car-centric the infrastructure is, how wide the roads are, and like there's just so much real estate there for development. So I don't know. It would be a fun potential place to sort of play with some of the stuff. I don't know, Brandel, if you're ever interested in doing like some VR, some 3D representations of streets, you know, we could start plugging away at this sort of stuff. But I mean, I love the idea of playing different cities off of one another to sort of slowly like get the Trip City conversation moving forward, right? Like just getting little precedent set in various places, and then just sort of like being like, oh yeah, that was us over there, that was us over there, you know. And when we say, oh well, yeah, see, like, you know, Detroit did it, but it was us, you know. So San Francisco did it, but that was us too.
Yeah, I just need to make the dumbest sort of road and curb simulator possible, and then get that in front of you so you can see what possible good it could do with the slightest bit of improvement. So I'll make a note of doing that.
Okay.
Make the worst curb simulator.
Yeah, right. It's like, you know, how far out is the curb from the building? How high is it from the street? What's the transition from the street? And then you can get granular as it goes, right? What's the material? What are the expansion gaps? How frequent are they? Blah, blah, blah.
Totally.
It could just, yeah, it could be like a real stupid rectilinear thing to begin with.
All right, gang.
Cool. This is
That's a
fun.
wrap.
All right.
See you in the other nozzles.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys later.
Take
Peace.
All right.
Bye all.
Care. Bye.